All right, let's go ahead and start and make sure they get back. All right. So again, let's just get a grip on the idea of theory. Let's just talk about theory again for a minute. We talk about theory as having four purposes, right? So what are the four things that we think having all these communication theories are going to do for us?
Predict.
Okay, they let us predict things about communication. Okay, so what does this whole cybernetic thing help us to predict?
The cycles of relationships.
Okay, so we can predict that there will be triangles. We can predict that there will be messages that are meant to function but don't function, right? So we can predict that there will be tension if someone tries to change the patterns. So it enables us to predict things. What else do theories do for us?
Describe what's going on.
Okay, so they provide a way to diagram or describe things. So in this case, what we can start to do is look for inputs and outputs. We can draw lines between things. We can look at the way things loop. So we can describe what's going on. It gives us a way, like semiotics gives us a way to describe what's going on. Well, there's a sign and it refers to it, has a signifier and it has an object and it has a mental image. So all of these theories are meant to give you complex ways to do analysis of communication. So talking about describe, predict. What else? We have two more things left. Theories do four things. We talked about predicting, we talked about describing.
Explain.
Okay, it explains. What does it mean to explain something going on in communication? What does that mean?
I feel like the way, when you say explain, like, it shows like when one person reacts to another, it just shows like, if, I don't know why.
All right, well that's
I just think in my
description.
head, it just when something's going on, it reacts. A reaction. Like if you do this, we learn what the reaction may be.
Okay.
Put it in different terms.
Well, you see, okay, this happens and there's a reaction. This happens, there's a reaction. That's a description. The explanation is, why does it happen? The explanation is the why. What's the dynamic going on? So in semiotics we say, well, the dynamic is that people are sharing a signifier, or they have a same mental image for a thing. What's going on in a cybernetic system is that the system is trying to either control something, is trying to make something happen, or stabilize something. So that's what's going on. So it explains communication as an attempt to control, to shape, to stabilize things. So that's the explanation that's going on in cybernetic approaches, to organize or to coordinate things. All right, so we've got explain, describe, predict, and we've got one left.
Transform.
Transform, control, change. So once you understand this, you realize that this arrangement of things is going to continue to cycle over and over again until there's a change in the patterns. So somebody changes the pattern of behavior that's going on, the communication patterns that are going on. So now we say, okay, we'll change it by doing this. So now the theory has given us a way to change or transform what goes on in this family, what goes on in this situation. So there's four things going on. That's just what theory is meant to do for you. And so we're getting all these theories in view to do this. Now this, Watzlawick and his associates worked in a veterans hospital out in California. And they worked with a lot of people who came back as vets and had a lot of adjustment problems. And so that's what they started to think about this. What's going on with the patterns that these people establish with others, and how does that affect them? And so they, instead of doing individual psychology, they looked at changing the way people learned to relate to others, the patterns they established with others, and tried to teach them to establish new kinds of patterns with other people so that they would not get into cycles of damaging relationships. So it was the idea that you understand individuals as part of a system. So if you see somebody behaving a certain way, you ask, all right, what's the rest of the system here? You know, friends, parents, neighbors, community, what's all part of shaping the behavior of this person? All right, so they looked a lot at family communication. And they said that relationships are complex functions. So let's just think about that for a minute. So Griffin gave you this example in the book. He said that one way is to think, well, this leads to this, which leads to this, which leads to that. You know, and that's a simple way of thinking about it. This causes this, which causes this, which causes this. But he says that's not the way behavior really works. He says that this behavior, B, is not just caused by one thing, but that B, and Griffin gives you this thing where B is, you know, x squared minus 2a over 5, you know, f or something.
Oh, yeah, that was funny.
Yeah, and what is the point there? He's not trying to give you an exact equation for things. He's trying to tell you that there's a whole bunch of things that go into it, and they go into it in complicated ways. So the reason that person is doing this behavior B is not, oh, well, that's because he's this or that. It's because family patterns affected and relationships with friends and the kind of job situation he has. All of these things have to be taken into account. The individual is explained as being part of a system. So it's a complex function, not a simple linear function where this leads to this, which leads to that. So they want to get you out of thinking simply about these things. And so they said every family is playing a game. Every family plays a unique game. Now, what does that mean? What is the game idea about? Tell me a game. Somebody tell me a game.
Monopoly.
Monopoly's a game. All right. So in Monopoly, there is a goal, right? What's the goal in Monopoly?
Get all the money, right?
All right. So
Oh, land.
what's that?
And collect.
Different strategies.
All right. So the goal is to get to be the one where everyone's giving you the money and you're just taking in all the money. So that's the goal of it. And there are certain ways you play it, right? You know, you roll the dice. I haven't played in a long time. I'm trying to be careful here. Right, you roll the dice. You move pieces on a board. You land in certain places or penalties. You get cards and all this stuff. So there are rules that lead to the goal, and there are things you can't do, right? In Monopoly, you can't just reach across the board, pick someone's hotels up, and put them on your place, right? You can't do that. That's against the rules of the game. So in Watzlawick's theory, he says every family is playing a game. So we can ask the question, what game is this family playing? What are the goals that this family wants to end up with? Right? So what do you think the goals of the family that Griffin talks about were? What's the goals of the Stan, Mike, Sonia, Lori family? What do you think?
To get Mike to act in a more acceptable manner, just, stop being like a problem child.
Okay, now that's part of what's going on because the family wants to achieve what? The goal of that family is to have, let me try this, is to have every member be a highly successful person in some field. Right? Lori's going to be tennis star and class president. Sonia's going to be the great piano teacher. So the goal of the family is that everybody excels. And so the rules are, you do all of these things. We have certain rules. And if someone gets out of, you cut them some slack, you make excuses for them, you bail them out, you tell them to do it for themselves. These are the rules that we go by. So a Watzlawick analysis would ask, what's the goal of this family? And now, let's ask you this question. What do you see as a potential problem with the game this family is playing? That every member of the family has to be a highly successful professional person.
You can't control other people.
Okay, so one of the potential problems with the game that they're playing is that not everyone's going to go to college, not everyone's going to be a pianist or an accountant or something. Someone's got to fix the cars, someone's got to do the plumbing, someone's got, there's a whole slew of things that's wrong with this game. So they would see Mike's behavior as a rejection of the game. That Mike is saying, no, I'm not going to play the game of becoming a highly successful professional person. So his behavior from the perspective of the game is a rejection of the game that the family's playing. So this is a way that you can do analysis of this. So every family plays a unique game, and they have rules about how you play it. The rules are, if somebody does something wrong, you bail them out, you put them back on track, because they'll keep going the way they ought to. But then what happens when someone rejects the goals and the rules don't work? Then you have a situation where you have feedback and you have to have adaptive communication. The communication has to shift. This theory helps you see what's going on. I mean, you could do this for your own family, right? I'm not going to ask you to do it here, but you could say, if you thought about it for a while, you could say, what is the game my family plays? What is the goal? If Monopoly, the goal is to, get all the pieces and have everyone paying you money. If football, the goal is to get the ball down through the end zone. What's the goal of the family that I'm in? Is it to, what's the goal? So once you identify that goal, then you can start to think about the rules that exist. And that goal may or may not be an attainable goal. It may not be a realistic goal. And there may be ways in which people rebel against that goal. And then there's new communication to try to stabilize it and put it back into play. But most times, what Watzlawick says is people are just doing this without even knowing what they're doing. It's just natural. This is, of course, what we're about. This is, of course. What else could there be? Why else would anybody exist? And so the rules and the game become very important. Games are sequences of behavior governed by rules. Every family plays its own game, creates its own reality. And so this idea of family stability, or homeostasis, he calls it a tacit collusion. All right? So that means we all just sort of go along with it and agree to make it work. And if somebody starts to get out of it, we put pressure on them. And so this is one of the classic examples of this is a child in school system who comes from a difficult home, or some kind of addiction, some kind of a dysfunction or other. And the family's, one of the rules of the family is we don't talk about family stuff outside the family. We keep secrets. The family keeps secrets. So sooner or later, some child in school tells a teacher or tells a social worker or writes a paper that reveals some of the family secrets. You know, that this happens or that happens. And then the parents may be asked to come in to talk to the teacher about what the child wrote. And then they deny it, and then the child gets pressure put on not to do that again. Because the family's playing a game, and the game is, we're a fine family, there's nothing wrong here, everything is good, and everyone is on track. That's the game we play. And the rules are we don't talk about anything outside the home. So there's pressure, there's a tacit collusion. Everybody just kind of plays by the rules because it stabilizes the game. It's the game we're playing. It makes it work. And he says the only way you're ever going to get out of this is if you begin to recognize the communication patterns that are keeping this in place. So this is a communication pattern solution to this. And so one of the things he says you have to realize is you cannot not communicate. So that everything that happens is communication. This tries to get you out of thinking that communication is only what people say to each other. So when I was in my doctoral program at Temple, for instance, I had a fellow student there in the doctoral program who was doing his doctorate on silence. And that's what he was studying. He was studying the way that silence communicates. Does silence communicate?
Sometimes.
Right. What does silence communicate?
Do you think that someone doesn't want to talk to you?
Okay. So it's a message. Silence is a message. I don't want to talk to you, or I'm not going to answer that, or I'm sad. Again, the context will tell you a bit what it is. So everything is communication. Shutting a door is communication. You know, sitting and reading a book is communication. What's that?
Like the way you stand, or
Yeah, nonverbal, the way you stand, how close you stand, all those nonverbal things. But whatever you do, where you choose to sit in a room can be communication. So this asks you to think about everything that happens as a form of message that has a function in a system. So what's the function of the person sitting over here instead of sitting over there? What's the function of them being silent at the table? What is that trying to accomplish in the system? So we cannot not communicate. And it talks about, a second rule is that you always have content plus relationship. Any message has two things that go with it. So it has what was done and then what it meant. So for instance, if let's say you say to your dorm people, you need to clean up. Right? There's content, right? You need to clean up. Well, how are the different ways that can be taken?
Clean up your act.
you call me like a messy
Physically.
person.
Yeah, okay, so depending on the relationship, you can take offense. Personally, are you calling me a messy person? She's calling me a messy person. That's the thing that you hear. You don't hear, you need to clean up. You hear, she's calling me a messy person. See, the relationship, then that probably is built on a previous history in the relationship or previous things that have happened. So every content is affected by the existing relationship. So for instance, I have some people I'm working with now who take everything anyone says to them as a put down. If someone says to them, let me do this, they hear, oh, you don't think I'm competent to do that. So there's content, let me do that, but the relationship changes the message to be, oh, you're putting me down. You don't think I'm able to do that. I mean, maybe you know people like this who take everything in some way. And what's going on is that communication is always about a content and a relationship. And so unless you're aware of that, you're not going to understand what's going on in this exchange. And so they talk about the need for meta-communication, which is the ability to talk about what we're talking about, how we talk to each other. So in that situation, where you say, let me do that, I'll do that. You just say, I hear you saying, let me do that, but I'm hearing that you don't think I can do it. Is that what you're saying? Is that what you mean to say? When I do that, I've stepped into meta-communication. I've asked about how are we communicating here. This is, see, they see this as the problem of this kind of a message that says, let's say someone has prepared a meal, right? They've done a lot of work preparing a nice meal, and they say, you better enjoy this meal, right? So how about that message? What's going on?
You feel like they're annoyed that they cooked the meal and you didn't.
Okay. All right, so you better enjoy this meal.
Or else.
Yeah, but you don't hear that part, right? You better enjoy this meal. So you got two messages. I'm supposed to enjoy this, but I have to make myself enjoy this. And Bateson and Watzlawick call that a double bind, meaning you're not able to really do both at the same time. If you're forced to do something, you're not going to enjoy it. So now I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. You've told me that I have to spontaneously do something non-spontaneous. So I'm in a bind here, and it makes me crazy.
So how do you fix that? The
Well, yeah, that's what Watzlawick and Bateson say. You've got to turn to meta-communication. In fact, they think part of the double binds are behind some cases of schizophrenia, where people grow up in systems where they're constantly getting impossible double messages, double binds, and they just don't know where to go with it.
I had a girlfriend like that years ago, and she'd call me, and I'd be in a perfectly fine mood, felt just perfectly normal, and then you'd ask her a question or say something to her, and all of a sudden she'd start saying, what are you saying, that I'm this, that, the other thing? And I said, no, I just,
Right.
I couldn't get through to her, and she would pounce on everything. Finally, after about 2 years of this, my
Right.
mother was over one time. She goes, why do you have that as a friend?
Right.
I said, well, I've known her a long time, and So finally, she called one day, and I said, you know what? Don't call me anymore. And she said, what? What? I said, no. You know what? I can't take your impression of what I'm saying and turn. I'd get off the phone, and I'd be pissed. I'd be yelling. I'd be
Right.
upset.
Right, there's no tolerance in that system, so that's an oscillating system. Right, that's use that as an oscillating system. But the double bind is the thing, you better enjoy this, we paid a lot of money so you could go to this.
Right.
Well, thanks, now I feel guilty, so how am I supposed to enjoy it? So I'm in a double bind.
What do you say? Like, enjoy it?
Like, I hope
cut
you
off your
enjoy
belly.
it.
Well, Watzlawick and others would say that you've at least got to work with somebody else who can acknowledge that that's impossible. It's an impossible demand. And at some point, they would probably work with you to bring into that family an understanding of those are impossible things that your messages you're sending are impossible. You need to change the patterns of messages. You can say, I really worked hard on this dinner. That's different than saying, you better enjoy it, because, so you learn new patterns. I mean, what if someone says to you, you better enjoy this, we spent a lot of money on this, what is the system function trying to get done? What does it want?
Forcing me to enjoy it.
It's not. What does that message want?
Not to waste money. Appreciation.
Okay, yeah, I think what it wants is appreciation and gratitude. So instead of being able to ask for appreciation, it puts you in a double bind, impossible situation. So Watzlawick and Bateson and others looked at this and the way it drove people nuts. And it ended up creating people who couldn't function because they were in that game with those rules. We can't say that's impossible for that to work. Okay, so the second one was this one: cannot not communicate. Communication involves both the content and the relationship. Then it talks about punctuation. And that this is the idea, we talked about this a little bit, the idea that but let's do the withdrawal pursuit cycle for a minute, okay? So somebody pursues contact with the other person. What's that?
Yeah, I just think this is really funny learning about this right now.
Well, and somebody withdraws, right? This is pretty common. So somebody pursues and somebody withdraws. All right, so if I'm the pursuer, and then it goes, it's a cycle, right? It's a cycle, it plays over and over again. So if I'm the pursuer, I say, I pursue because they withdraw. I tell you the story, and I explain my behavior. How? My behavior is caused by
The other person.
their behavior. I'm not starting this. I'm just responding to what they're doing. Now you talk to the withdrawing person. How do they explain it?
You're crazy.
Well, they say, I withdraw because
I feel suffocated.
I feel suffocated, because they pursue. So that person explains it starting from a different point. So we call that punctuation. Where did you start the communication from? Where did you start the explanation from? So this is, again, where...
Is it a losing battle?
Yes, it is. Right. You've got to get out of it. You've got to say it doesn't matter who started it. It doesn't matter who's responsible for it. We don't like the pattern we're in. Let's change the pattern we're in.
The only way the pattern can be changed is the pursuer stops pursuing.
No. It can be changed in many different ways.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, the withdrawer can learn to communicate better, have patience. I mean, there's untold ways that can change. And it can, usually what you say to people is that each person should change a little bit, but it can change in many different ways. But the point is, as long as you're punctuating the sequence differently from each other, as long as one person is starting here, well, the reason I do it is because you did this. And then the other person says, yeah, but I did that because you did this. And then, right, you're never going to get out of that. So you'll get out of it. Watzlawick and Bateson and others say you'll get out of those patterns because they are loops. In fact, one, I don't know if when you took interpersonal you studied unwanted repetitive patterns in coordinated management of meaning, where you can predict this. I've had students do this in interpersonal where they write about some exchange that is typical in their relationships or in their home that it always ends up badly. And they can predict it. So it's like coming home after you were supposed to be home or something, and how is that communication going to go? Well, you'll say this, they'll say this, you'll say this, they'll say this, and then sooner or later you get to a point where there'll just be this vibration back and forth of, well, no, you're wrong, no, you're wrong, you know you're wrong, you know, and you're at this oscillation between where it goes nowhere. And so what you've got to do is recognize those patterns, and you've got to just punctuate it differently. Sometimes that means admitting, saying, okay, all right, I'm willing to say that I started this, but it doesn't matter now because I want to get out of it. So let's change the pattern. So let's stop relating this way. So what I do with students in interpersonal is that we look at that and we look for points where you could have said something different. Where can you interrupt the predictable pattern?